Hi, y'all, and welcome to tonight's live stream. I have something to say that I really hate to say. I really don't want to say it. Just don't make me say it. But here's the thing. Lori Vallow Daybell is doing better than expected in this trial, and maybe even a lot better, especially when she is cross-examining these detectives. Now, to be completely clear, I am not saying that she's innocent or that her cross-examinations are perfect or even that she's going to win. But I am saying, I mean, she's still Lori Vallow Daybell. Yes, she's still the woman already convicted of 4 murders or conspiracies to murder. But if we were expecting her to crash, to burn in Arizona, just because she's acting as her own lawyer, that is not quite what's happening. So today and yesterday's testimony highlighted the many things that law enforcement failed to do when they investigated the shooting of Brandon Boudreaux. They did not, for example, test the trajectory of the bullet or figure it out. They didn't test the glass. They didn't save the Tesla. They didn't take measurements. They drove the crime scene vehicle. No tow truck, no evidence impound, and they may have misrepresented some facts in a sworn affidavit to a judge. Lori's cross actually made that clear. She actually made some headway. She poked some holes in what they were saying and asked real questions. She's succeeded to some degree in making the investigation look sloppy, but does that mean she's winning? No. It does not. But it does mean it's not the slam dunk case that a lot of people thought this might be. Tonight, we're going to dive into all of it. You'll see some of Lori's sort of surprising legal moves, what she's getting right, what this may mean for the rest of the trial and what's coming up. One thing I forgot to do is check and make sure y'all can hear me. I hate it when I do that. Let's make sure. Let's go. Yes. Oh, good. Okay. That's a relief. Okay. You know what? I owe a huge thank you to you. We hit 200,000 subscribers today. And that is 100% an award for you because you're the subscribers. I cannot thank you enough. I mean, this is so unbelievably shocking. If you had told me when I was in law school, one day you will have a YouTube channel with 200,000 subscribers. First, I would have said, what's YouTube? So, I probably would have said, what's the internet? This is a long time ago. So I just can't say thank you enough. Your support means more than I can even express. It will do something special for the 200,000, but I just wanted to say, since it's today, thank you. Thank you very much. I also want to say a special thank you to our mods, Marlon and Mama Pinks, who are here day in and day out, slogging away, helping us in the chat. I'm so appreciative of their help. And the first 5 in tonight's live stream, Dr. Go Duke Basketball, Maria Z, Colleen D, Mari Marigo, and Angel LaFawn. Well, let's talk a little bit about some of the points that Lori Vallow Daybell has made. With the witness Thomas Miller from the DEA, he talked about how they had managed to find literally one photo of the Jeep Wrangler with the Texas license plate. It was captured on I-40 in Holbrook, Arizona, and there's no tire on the back of it. So they believe this is it. This is the tire. This is the Jeep. But Lori Vallow Daybell made some decent points on cross. The place where this picture was captured was 173 miles away from Gilbert, Arizona, where Brandon Boudreaux was shot. Now, the prosecution believes that Alex Cox, Lori's brother, was driving this vehicle that he drove from Rexburg, Idaho, where they had moved, that he drove down to Arizona to shoot and kill Brandon Boudreaux. He missed. Other than that, it would be an all-the-way murder trial as it is. It's an attempted murder, and Lori is accused of conspiring with Alex. So despite all the cameras that were available, only this single image was captured. Then there was Mary Ann Robb, retired from the Gilbert Police. She was first on the scene. Now, on cross, she began to get into a theme that we're going to hear over and over, that Brandon Boudreaux had various different names for the color of the Jeep. We're going to look at that Jeep. We're going to look at the possible colors tonight. Was it green? Was it gray? Was it blue? We're going to talk about all of that. The Jeep was about 10 feet away from the driveway. And Lori kind of made the point, well, how hard would it be to hit the target from that distance? And there was then a juror question. Well, when you're hunting with a rifle, would it be easier or harder to hit a closer target? And the witness said, oh, it would be much harder to hit a target up close. I don't know. I find that really hard to believe. I mean, what about the expression, couldn't hit the broad side of a barn, right? I just, to me, it seems instinctive that if something is up close, it should be easier to hit than if it's far away. But the witness said, no, it would be much easier to hit something further away than something up close if you're using a rifle. And I get that a rifle is long, but still. Now, of course, we do know that Alex Cox missed at least two, if the various prosecution's theories are right, at least two targets. He missed Tammy Daybell once, and he missed Brandon Boudreaux, if the prosecution in this case is correct. And in between, he took some target lessons. He headed out for some target practice, maybe not lessons, but some practice. So he may have been worried about it too. They haven't put that into this trial, but we know it from Chad and Lori's murder trials in Idaho. So Detective Pillar was next on the stand. And I first want to talk about some of the points that the state landed that came out strongly for the state. He processed the Jeep that belonged to Lori Vallow Daybell in Rexburg, Idaho, where it was located. She had moved there and they were cooperating with the police there. He said that the back windows were very dark. Check that off, because that's also something Brandon Boudreaux noticed. The rear tire was on the Jeep, so it was no longer missing. And they collected gunshot residue in the back of the Jeep, or at least swab for it, and we'll hear more about that from another witness. Now, in fact, they also found cell phone records of Lori and Alex that showed they had made an appointment to get the windows tinted dark. And the morning of the shooting, there were a couple of calls from Alex to Lori, or vice versa. And the first one was at 8:02 in the morning, shortly before Brandon was shot. And then there was a 24-minute call between Alex and Lori's burner phones, both located in Rexburg. Well, that would counter what the state says, right? The state says Alex is not in Rexburg, Idaho. He's in Arizona. But the prosecution is suggesting that Lori intentionally used Alex's phone in order to cover up what he was doing, that he was out of town with this shooting. Personally, I question that. I am not at all sure that they did that. And the reason I do that is because that's not something they did in any of the other murders. That isn't just sort of their modus operandi. That isn't what they did. So my guess is maybe someone else was using the phone, like Chad. But Lori missed a very obvious question here. And that's, she never said, you don't know who was using those phones. All you know is that we purchased them and they were used in Arizona. You don't know, used in Idaho. You don't know who used them. So there were also every phone from Alex's track phone in Arizona. According to the FBI, it actually was in Arizona, where he could have been nearby to shoot Brandon Boudreaux. Every call was to or from Chad Daybell. So those are some really good points that the state made. Let's see. Thank you, Mildred. Here's to the next 200K. I agree with you. Thank you so much, Mildred. I appreciate that very much. And Miss Spunky, drink of choice fun. Thank you. Well, we all know what that would be, don't we? We all know of my Diet Coke problem. So thank you, Miss Spunky. I really appreciate that. Michael, no, it is green, forest green. Or maybe not, maybe Kelly green. Put it that way. And thank you, Evangeline. I appreciate that very much. And I am excited too. I'm just absolutely thrilled, over the moon. I just still can't believe it. It seems so impossible. I just can't even, I don't even know what to say, but thank you. All right. So let's add in, we're going to watch some clips from the trial, from the cross-examination Lori did of Detective Pillar. Apparently, there was a lot of disagreement about the color of the Jeep. It was not consistent, witness to witness, or even within what Brandon Boudreaux was telling the police. So Lori suggests maybe that means it wasn't my vehicle. Apparently, Lori's vehicle was gray. Brandon initially suggested that the vehicle was green. Now, I've seen pictures of Lori's vehicle, and it looked green to me, at least when it was pictured inside the garage at the home where Charles Vallow was shot. But I'm going to show you some pictures after we listen to this testimony, and then you can kind of make some decisions for yourself about what you think.
Here's with Officer Rob. He described it as a green colored.
And what color did Mr. Boudreaux say the Jeep was when he was with Officer Marianne Robb?
Here. Let's
when he was with Officer Rob, he described it as a green colored Jeep.
And what was the color of the Jeep that was seen by witnesses in the neighborhood?
It was referred to as different colors. What I surmised it to be was a darker colored Jeep Wrangler.
So did you hear dark blue?
I do not remember specifically hearing dark blue, but I know that color has been brought up.
And is it your understanding that the color that Brandon pulled up on his phone to show the officers was camo green? Is that correct?
That's what was discussed by Officer Rob, but I was not privy to that actual conversation, and there was no supplement that I saw that indicated that.
So when is the first time you wrote in all of your reports that it was a gray Jeep? So where did you glean that information that the Jeep was gray?
The gray Jeep came about from my contact with the Chandler Police Department on October 9th.
So Brandon never told you it was a gray Jeep, is that correct?
I do not recall him ever describing it in the initial contacts as a gray Jeep, no.
And none of the neighbors ever called it a gray Jeep also, is that correct?
Not to me, no.
So that's some really pretty good cross, because what she's saying is you thought that the Jeep was green or some other color up until you found out that my Jeep was gray, at which point you decided that the Jeep was gray. And from then on, that's what you put. You put, for example, when you asked for the search warrant, you said it was gray, but you said it was gray because that was my vehicle, not because any witness had told you that. So that's some pretty decent cross. Let's take a look at a few of the pictures. I have to remove that and then add this. Okay, so these are all the pictures, all the colors for the 2019 vehicles that I can find. I thought we should probably do a couple of close-ups. Let's see. Here we go. This is not what I mean to be showing you. I am showing you the wrong thing. Okay, let's pull that out. And let's stop screen share there. Let's present a different screen. And let's see. Oh, I see what it is. It's only order dismissing. We'll scoot over. Okay, so those are all of the vehicle colors for 2019 that I can find. You can't really see them there, so I pulled a couple out, made them bigger. This, I am curious, what would you call this? Would you call this gray? Would you call this green? Would you call it blue? Put your answer in the chat, because I don't know. I can see where it could be easily fit into more than one category. And even more ambiguous, I think, is this one. So give me a number one and the color you thought that first picture was. What do you think that color is? And then give me a number two and what you think this color is, because I don't know. I don't know. I would be interested to see what you think. So this is number one. What color do you think that is? This is number two. What color do you think that is? We should probably do a vote. We should probably do a poll and see. You know what? Well, that'll take a while. Let's keep going. Let's keep going. All right. So, but I'll look to get your thoughts on what that is in the chat. So I forgot to ask too, would you mind hitting the like button? That'll help this get out to more people. And please, if you haven't subscribed, please join us. We are now 200,000 strong, and we would love to have you in our group. So, okay, wow, lots of different colors, blue, gray. I thought the same thing on the first one. And I think the second one is green. But we have it all over. So that could explain why it was so difficult for them to get witnesses to agree on that. So let's pull that out and let's
The police report stated that they found glass in the road, but only one piece was photographed. Is that correct?
From the photos I've seen, yes.
And then was that piece of glass that was found, one little piece, tested to see if it was actually glass from the window?
No.
And so did you just assume it was from the window?
With the time frame from the initial call for service to officer arrival, and the consistency with the other shards of glass, I believed it to be related.
But you don't know that for sure at all. Is that correct?
Correct. With the information provided by Mr. Boudreaux and the neighbors describing where this Jeep was located, where I believe, at least at the time, where that glass shard might be related in the roadway, I would guess. I don't want to guess because we didn't measure, and I don't know exactly where the individual was in the Jeep. What I can say is it was within a few feet. And when I say a few feet, I'm going to say 10 to 20.
In your estimation, Detective Hiller, how far was the Jeep when the supposed shot was taken? And why were no measurements taken?
We didn't know exactly where that Jeep was located. We had an idea of where it was parked, but we didn't have an exact location for that Jeep, a specific spot.
If it was parked nose to nose with that white van, you kind of know exactly where it was parked.
We have a good idea of where it was at, absolutely.
But no measurements were taken.
No measurements, no ma'am.
Okay, so let's break that down because, again, she's making some pretty good points. The police found glass pieces in the roadway. They believed that supported Brandon's story that someone had shot at him while he was in the road because the glass was there. It wasn't just that he pulled into his driveway, opened up the car door, and the glass fell out. That did happen, but some little pieces were also out in the roadway. But Lori's pointing out, how do you know these are pieces from the window? You just assumed that it went together, but you didn't actually measure them or do any testing or do anything to determine that these pieces of glass match the window of Brandon Boudreaux's car. So you just assume that. That's some pretty good cross. And then she also asked about where exactly did this all happen? Another really important question. And his answer that they don't really know, she's kind of right. They know the vehicle that they were told by Brandon Boudreaux and by another witness that the vehicle was parked nose to nose right up with another vehicle, which was still parked there. So they could have gotten a pretty good idea. Obviously, the problem is they weren't seeing this as a murder investigation. And he's going to say that. He's going to admit that right up. But they admit they didn't take any measurements. And we also find out on cross that they did nothing to figure out the trajectory.
And what measures were taken to decide the trajectory?
I don't know how to answer that question.
Okay, did the Gilbert Police Department ever decide on what the trajectory actually was?
No.
So were there tests done to find the trajectory?
No, because again, we don't have the exact placement, the height, the angle in which the projectile came from. And we can't determine that with just the hole in the Tesla that was since moved prior to police arrival.
Okay, so you can find out how tall the Jeep was, right?
No.
You cannot?
No.
And you don't know how tall the Tesla was?
The Tesla we could figure out at the time, but we did not measure the Tesla.
So no trajectory was ever really determined. Is that correct?
Correct.
And of course, if the police had wanted to, they could have calculated those sorts of things, but it didn't seem relevant or important at that time. And they also didn't think through or consider what type of gun would make a hole the size of what they were seeing there in the Tesla. And she's going to get into that as well.
And the hole in the car, in the Tesla, was approximately 1 inch wide and 2 inches long. Is that correct?
From the sticker, The letter A sticker, yes.
And then what type of bullet could make that kind of damage?
Check to expertise or knowledge, foundation.
What was your determination of what kind of bullet would make a hole that large?
I don't have any ammunition training or certifications to provide that answer accurately. The information I was provided, it at least seems that a rifle was the most reasonable weapon that was utilized to shoot at Mr. Boudreaux's car.
So one of the points that she made that really did strike me as surprising was that despite all of the cameras that were available, they were only able to find one photograph of the vehicle, and that was nearly 200 miles away. Here's how that came in.
And so in all of what you asked Lori Orr to get, you have this one in Holbrook, Arizona on October 1st. Is that correct?
That is correct. The one that has been.
And
yes.
nothing in Gilbert
Correct?
on October 2nd?
Correct.
Nothing.
There were no LPR hits for that vehicle or that plate in the Phoenix metro area in the cities during that time frame.
Time frame meaning October 1st to October 3rd.
Yes, 2019, yes, from February 12th.
So they were, another point Lori made was that they were definitely at least thinking about, considering, looking at Melanie Boudreaux as a possible suspect. They were specifically asking Brandon Boudreaux to send them the financial incentive she might have had. So if he had insurance or anything else that might give her an incentive that would make her better off if he was no longer alive, they were asking for that. They weren't asking for Lori's financial incentive because apparently, according to what she says, and we will get into that, she had none. And on the other hand, maybe Melanie did.
Of 2020.
The defense would move to publish the email?
State would object. We're going to go into
We
that.
already discussed this exhibit. It's, I'll sustain the objection. It's not being entered into evidence.
In that email, Detective, did you request that Brandon provide you with financial information regarding his ex-wife, Melanie Boudreaux?
And Your Honor, I'm going to ask to sidebar again regarding defenses.
Detective Filler, did you?
So let's stop right there. Melanie did have, and I should say it the other way around, Brandon Boudreaux had a life insurance policy. Melanie was the beneficiary. So the judge and the prosecutor repeatedly discouraged Lori from getting into that issue because it could open up issues about her own financial incentives. And then that could lead the jury to learn about her incentives. That could then maybe be moved into the question of whether or not the jury finds out about the 4 murder convictions, 2 for murder, 2 for conspiracy to murder, that she already has. At this point, the jury has been qualified for that, meaning they've made sure that nobody on the jury knows that about Lori Vallow Daybell. But she is not taking no for an answer, and she pushes on that.
You request that financial information regarding Melanie from Brandon?
Yes, I think it's safe to say yes, that there were emails exchanged about Melanie Boudreaux, Pulowski's financial records being sent to me.
Right. So her financial gain if something were to happen to Brandon. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So he also provided you with screenshots of information regarding Melanie that didn't have to do with finances. Is that also correct?
Your Honor, I'm going to object again and warn on 404A and 405.
Sustained.
So it's hard to know exactly what she's talking about here because of the objection, but it's outside the financial incentive. And it sounds like from some of the other questioning that Melanie must have thought that she knew who the perpetrator might be. She seemed to be perhaps suggesting to the police that maybe it was some sketchy operators, people that Brandon had been involved with. You'll hear some hints of that, but we never really get enough to understand exactly what is being said here. So first of all, thank you, Bethany. I really appreciate that very much. And thank you. And Swanee Speed Ramsey is suggesting that maybe it was a 2018 Jeep. That could be. Hopefully same colors. Either way, I have a feeling that they would be fairly ambiguous. Do y'all remember the dress that was either gold or white, depending on how you saw it. I forget which color it was that it seemed so clear to me, but it was the opposite of what everybody else thought. So you may remember that, and how you looked at it just depended on kind of the way your brain saw that. All right, let's keep watching.
So on those screenshots, does Melanie give a theory of what she thinks happened on October 2nd, 2019 that you reviewed?
Not that I remember from that exchange. I'm
Suggests that maybe he remembers from something else. So she shows him the document, but he says he still
I'll
doesn't.
say that I don't remember this. There was a lot of correspondence shared and a lot of images. But looking at this seems familiar with some of the allegations that I've heard throughout the investigation. However, I don't remember this specific document being sent to me. There were other investigations I was working on as well.
Got that in.
So did you disregard the information in that during your investigation?
I'm going to object, and I think we may need to sidebar again.
Yeah, let's sidebar.
So once again, and there were a lot today, they sidebarred, and that consists of, with one exception, when everybody went up there, for the most part, they wear headphones. Lori and the prosecutor sit at their tables with headphones on. The judge has headphones on, and they talk back and forth to each other while white noise or brown noise, I don't know what it's called, is played there inside the room so no one else can hear what they're saying. And that's how they have their sidebars. So what is this incredible danger that Lori is walking into? What evidence is there that Melanie's financial gain would also be Lori's financial gain? Something was just rattling around in the back of my brain. I was like, something, I remember this. I seem to remember Lori saying that Melanie would her insurance would help them. I couldn't remember it, but I want to thank Lori and Janice, sorry, and especially Christina, who ultimately found it, for all looking for this today. I really appreciate that. It was in Zulema's testimony in Chad's trial. Here's what it is.
And do you recall Lori or Chad telling you something in regards to that?
Yeah, Lori said to me, "Oh, don't worry about it. Melly has enough money for all of us."
When she said Melly or Melanie, do you know who she was referencing?
Melanie Pulaski.
Did you ever talk to Melanie about that at a later time?
Yeah, after Alex passed away.
Did Melanie seem to know anything about the plan for her to financially support people?
No, she had no idea.
Your Honor, I have what's been marked as State's Exhibit.
Okay, and we'll go ahead and stop it right there. Now, I am not sure what exactly they could do with this, because I don't think that they have any plan to call Zulema as a witness to testify. And it isn't clear from the statement that was made there that they're talking about Melanie having insurance because Brandon died. So it's all a little vague, but I knew there was something back there about money and Melanie and the connection to Lori. So that may be the kind of thing that they're talking about. There may even be more evidence of that we don't yet know about that might be included. So I do think Lori made some actual headway with the fact that overall, this was what you would just have to call kind of an unenthusiastic investigation. So we'll hear a little bit more.
What happened with the Tesla window? I know it fell out of the car. I'm sitting on the driveway. So where did it go from there?
The Tesla, the glass from the window that fell out of the Tesla itself was discarded.
Was what?
Thrown away. It was discarded.
Oh, it was thrown away.
Yes.
And when did that happen?
I don't recall. I believe after we were concluding our time at the scene, we had our photographs of it, was turned over to the resident, in that case, Mr. Boudreaux, to dispose of.
Okay. And it wasn't preserved for any reason?
No.
Why not?
We collected what we needed from it at that moment, and the amount of glass that was there and the images that were taken seemed sufficient at the time. And so it was simply thrown away.
I mean, can you imagine what headway a lawyer could make with that? Because literally they had all this glass. It had at least some bit of broken out piece because of a bullet, and they just threw it away. They just didn't keep it. They literally threw it away. She doesn't really seem to know what to do with this. It's a pretty important point, but she doesn't really know how to carry that through with some cross-examination. So here's kind of how it came out.
Was there a hole in that window at all, like a bullet hole?
A bullet hole through the window outside of the images that have been presented that would indicate where an impact point may have been, so kind of the curvature towards the top of the glass. Outside of that, no, there was no other damage that would match about a bullet hole.
Okay. And you didn't carefully put on 2 pairs of gloves and take it to the evidence room at the Gilbert Police Department, is that correct?
Take the glass?
Correct.
That's correct.
And what about the
Okay, so for example, she could have been saying, you could have done this test, you didn't do that. You could have done this test, you didn't do that. Here was this other thing you could have done, you did that, you didn't do that. And just sort of listed it. You didn't even save it. You just threw it away. It was potential evidence and you threw it away. And then you decided to charge me with murder. I mean, that's basically the argument. So they also didn't save or in any way measure the Tesla. And it looks even worse than that, the way it comes out. You can hear it here.
So what happened to the Tesla that day?
After we processed the Tesla at the scene, we transported it over to the Gilbert Police Department to further inspect indoors.
Do you tow it over?
No, it was, although unorthodox, it was transported by myself and followed by Detective McDermott to the Property and Evidence Building, where we had a technician standing by. Once arrival to the garage at that facility, we further looked into the bullet hole, and we weren't there very long. It was, again, another last review of the damage.
So you drove it over, is that correct?
That is correct.
And it was photographed?
Yes, we photographed the vehicle at the scene. Once at the police department, we have the surveillance cameras, but we didn't photograph it further once at the police department. We had no intention of impounding it at that time.
And it was measured?
No, the
The bullet hole and things were measured? All that was done at the scene, but nothing was done at the Gilbert Police Department?
Yes,
And then it wasn't tested for the trajectory while at the Gilbert Police Department?
that's correct.
And it wasn't placed into evidence?
We did not impound the vehicle. The smartphone that we took temporary custody of, for convenience purposes, it was ultimately turned back over to the owner, in this case, Mr. Boudreaux, both the vehicle and the smartphone.
So I'm not at all surprised that they didn't keep his vehicle. I don't know that there was a need to keep his vehicle more than maybe a day or two or however long it took. But what is surprising to me is that they took it over to the station as if they wanted to do something with it. And then they did nothing at all with it when they got it there. They didn't test it or measure it or do anything. And he admits it's kind of unorthodox that instead he uses that word unorthodox to drive it over instead of have it towed. Almost like he maybe wanted to drive a Tesla. And I think that's what she's suggesting, that he just wanted to drive the Tesla. And so he drove it over there, did nothing at all with it, and then just gave it back to the owner. So that's not a super professional look for the law enforcement. And, Lori has gotten that out in front of the jury. Hey, Jackie P., thank you so much for gifting 5 Lawyer League memberships. You can join anytime. You can subscribe by hitting the subscribe button for free. If you want to join us as a member, we would love that. There's a join button down by the name of the channel, unless you're on your iPhone. And then you will have to go in through your browser, or you'll have to use your computer. But for Jackie's gift, 5 random people will be chosen by YouTube. So be sure to turn on your ability to receive a gifted membership. Our mods, Marlon and Mama Pinks, will put that in the chat so you'll know how to do that.
And having been a case agent hundreds of times, you must have known that if you were ever going to charge someone with this crime, then surely you would need this evidence so the defense could hire their own experts to do testing of the car and the window, right?
The crime of this caliber, and it's not uncommon for cases to develop into something more than what you initially believe, that's part of being human, part of being an investigator. We did not take a vehicle in this case. We did not have a decedent. In other words, we did not have a person who was injured or killed. We had property damage, and we were still very early in our investigation to determine what happened. So, no, we did not maintain custody of that vehicle.
So is it not in your protocol to preserve evidence,
It's in our protocol to preserve evidence.
but not in this case?
In this case, I made the decision not to maintain custody of that Tesla.
So without this evidence available, how would my experts be able to test for trajectory?
We couldn't test for trajectory with what we had. If it was here today, it's possible that you guys could test for trajectory with the advancements in technology. Again, not being somebody who is trained or certified in any type of trajectory training, I don't know how that process would even look, but we simply don't have the vehicle today as we're discussing this.
Trajectory?
At that time, we did not.
Okay. How would my ballistics expert be able to test the hole in the Tesla to determine, in fact, if it was a rifle or a handgun that was used? How would I do that?
And he doesn't have an answer to that. And those are some of the points that she made, was the fact that you didn't preserve it makes it difficult for me to prove my innocence to make my case. Now, like I said, I'm not at all surprised that they turned the vehicle back over to Brandon. I don't think there would have been any reason to keep it. But I can see her point that maybe some testing or something would have been done, especially if they bothered to take it over to the station. But they also didn't test the glass. They didn't test the bullet fragments. She'll make both of those points.
Testing was done with the window either. Is that correct?
You're referring to the glass that was?
Yes, the glass.
No other tests were done with the glass.
Okay. And how about the 4 pieces of the projectile that were found? Were any of those tested?
Tested for?
For what kind of bullet they came from or what kind of gun they came from?
Again, not being a munitions expert, but seeing what bullet fragments look like and what projectiles can turn into upon impact, those fragments could not determine any type of rifling, which is the marks that are made within a barrel when a weapon is shot. Because the bullet was not intact, and we had no casing, we had no gun to verify where it came from. We simply had some markings of some possible jacketing and the lead, which appeared consistent with a bullet that was fired and then, of course, was fragmented. We were satisfied that we had a individual get shot at by some firearm, be it rifle, handgun, but a firearm, eastbound to westbound, that collided and then ultimately ended up in Mr. Boudreaux's body frame. But to send it off for further testing, no, we did not send it off for further testing based on any reason that we knew we would not be able to get any viable weapon to compare it to, or any type of rifling where that would match another firearm.
So he's pretty much admitting that from the early time that they began the investigation, they didn't really see this as that significant a case. They initially sort of thought, okay, we've got the limited amount of information we've got, and no one really was looking at this as a potential attempt to murder Brandon Boudreaux. At least they weren't treating it that way. Brandon had essentially the same thought, because when he concluded that they were not doing the investigation, he hired someone. He hired a private investigator to actually begin to do more investigation to make sure that all of the points he wanted covered were covered. Now, Lori points out that Brandon had a very specific memory of a rifle sticking out the window. And what if it turns out that your measurements could show it was a handgun, not a rifle? Wouldn't that cast at least a little doubt on what Brandon said? Now, whether or not the jury would hold him to being able to know, oh, yes, it was exactly this kind of gun. You know, it looked like it when he's being shot at while driving down the road. I'm not sure they would, but her point was made. There was also a lot of confusion that she brought out over just how many neighbors heard the gunshot. And again, it was a little bit worse than that, because the detective actually made statements about how many people heard it that may have been incorrect. Here's how that came out at trial.
Detective Pillar, how many neighbors confirmed that they heard a gunshot?
Hearing a loud bang or hearing a gunshot, approximately 4, 5.
4. Do you know who those were? Who those neighbors were?
Not off the top of my head, no. From my memory.
Was that in one of your reports, that 4 neighbors heard a gunshot?
In my report, I documented the detectives who made contact with neighbors that either heard something or had the electronic surveillance on their house that, although did not capture footage of the incident, captured consistent noise of a loud bang, as well as a vehicle idling for an extended period of time near their residence, which is near where the Jeep would have been parked prior to Mr. Boudreaux arriving and then upon his arrival. But it just captured audio with no, again, once again, no footage of the actual shooting.
But you say multiple neighbors. Is that what your understanding was? That multiple neighbors heard a loud noise?
Yes.
So Brandon heard a loud noise. You have the ring that was a loud noise, right? Who else?
I don't know off the top of my head.
Could it be that there was no one else, just those two?
There were other neighbors that acknowledged hearing a noise. That was a loud noise. That was not a normal noise.
Were those across the street? In a sworn
So in other words, he's not able to actually bring the names, and that casts some doubt on what was stated by him about how many heard this. Now, there's also, as we mentioned earlier, a lot of confusion about exactly what color this Jeep is. What color was Lori's Jeep? What color was the Jeep where someone shot at Brandon Boudreaux? So the detective wrote out the probable cause statement when they were trying to get a search warrant for the Jeep that had been impounded from Lori in Idaho. And in that probable cause affidavit, he told the court that neighbors confirmed that they saw a gray Jeep, but it's going to turn out that that may not actually be the case. As the question
statement that you made, detective, you put the other neighbors confirmed they observed a gray colored hardtop two-door Jeep. What neighbors do you know of that said that there was a gray Jeep?
Okay, yes, I see where this is in the affidavit.
And earlier you had testified that no one had said the Jeep was gray at all, but in your sworn testimony there, you say that other neighbors confirmed that they observed a gray colored hardtop two-door Jeep. What neighbors would those be?
And this is the probable cause statement from,
For the infotainment center?
yeah, for the infotainment center, but on what date?
November 19th, 2019?
November 19th, 2019? Okay, so I don't recall who specifically said that they saw the gray-colored hardtop two-door Jeep.
And you're saying in that neighbors confirmed that they saw a gray colored hardtop two-door Jeep, but that was not true.
Suppose the one word that I could exchange from anything is a dark-colored hardtop two-door Jeep. But at this point in my investigation, I had confirmed that it was a gray-colored two-door Jeep, yes.
And there was another point, something that was found at the scene that Lori points out might be evidence that someone else was involved. It was a cigarette butt. Now, Alex, she's going to point out, doesn't smoke. And that is true in general for a lot of members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. They were all a member of that. Many refer to that as the Mormon Church. I'll use that either one, whichever one you call it. But here's how that came out in this.
Was there any other evidence taken to the property evidence building?
I believe there was a cigarette butt. I believe there was multiple photographs. Other physical evidence I do not recall us taking.
You don't recall what?
I don't recall taking other physical evidence from the scene off the top of.
So a cigarette butt?
I believe a cigarette butt was across the street. And a neighbor thought it was inconsistent with being near his house because he didn't smoke.
Okay. Was DNA taken off of the cigarette butt?
No, I believe we still have it retained in our property evidence building.
So if you would have taken the DNA off the cigarette butt, then you might have a person who was smoking it?
We would
At the
probably
scene?
have a DNA profile of somebody who was walking down the street smoking a cigarette, yes.
So you didn't really think it was connected to this incident necessarily?
No,
Okay. And why was it collected?
because it was within the crime scene tape at this time, and the detective who spoke with the neighbor who provided the information thought it should be collected.
And during the course of your investigation, you never discovered that Brandon Boudreaux was a smoker, right?
No,
Or that Alex Cox was a smoker, right?
no.
Did
All right. So, and as the final thing that we're going to finish up with that, and I want to talk to you a little bit about where I think Lori is headed, whether I think this is going to work, whether I think it's going to be successful. So hang on for just a minute. There is one thing I do want to say. Someone asked me about whether or not, this is, I guess, our last live stream. They asked me, do you think that the prosecutor is doing too much of asking leading questions when these are her witnesses and she's supposed to just be having them on direct, asking only questions like you're allowed to do when you have a witness on direct? When you bring a witness, you aren't allowed to ask them leading questions. You're supposed to just let them tell their story by just asking enough so they know kind of what direction, and then they take it over from there. As opposed to when you're on the other side, when you're cross-examining the other side's witnesses, then you can say, isn't it true that, and right, correct? And you can say, you can use a different style. So I will say this, I pulled these out today. They were really strong examples of the prosecutor cross-examining like crazy. And she has the witness on direct. This is her witness. Now, Lori is not objecting. And that's the touchstone. If the attorney, or in this case, Lori acting as her own attorney, if they don't object, if they don't say something, then that means it's not going to be something that's available on appeal. Let's listen to a little bit of it, and I'll show you what I mean.
Brandon Boudreaux stop at the time of the shooting and put down a little ticky-tack marker and say, better note this for later so I can tell the detectives exactly where my vehicle was when I was shot?
No, he did not.
Objection!
Did Brandon Boudreaux get out of his car and go over and mark the exact end of the Jeep so that you would know exactly where that was when he was shot?
No, he did not.
Did he go over and tell the person, whoa, I gotta wait and find out exactly how this rifle barrel is sticking out of the back of your Jeep so that later on, they'll be able to document the height, the angle, if it's up, if it's down, if it's a little to the right or left, so that later on they'll be able to do some trajectory?
No.
I mean, it could not be any clearer, right? That's definitely leading. She's describing everything and he's just yes or no. But Lori, because she had an objection overruled in the last trial, she's just not objecting at all. I mean, she's just really not doing it. And she's definitely not objecting to the form of the question, to the prosecutor leading any of the witnesses. And it is, I think it may actually be at a problem level. I think that was too much. I think the prosecutor would be better off to dial it back. And I'll tell you two reasons for that. One is just as a matter of fairness, given that she is a prosecutor and is responsible for bringing cases and administering her side of the case with fairness. I think that would be good. I also think, though, there's even an element of self-preservation in it, because as both the judge and the prosecutor have noted, it's really critical that when you have a pro se plaintiff, or pro se, in this case, defendant, who representing themselves, you really have to bend over backwards to make sure that they get the appropriate safeguards within the legal system. Because if they don't, the appellate courts are very quick to jump on that. And they really want to know that the defendant, in this case, has been treated fairly. And if the defendant is not being treated fairly, you have a much higher chance of getting the case reversed. Nobody wants that. Nobody wants to try this again. Not the judge, not the prosecutor, not even Lori Vallow Daybell. So for that reason, I think it would be a really good idea for her to dial it back. And I hope she will do that. But here, I'll play a couple more for you.
Asked about the glass as well. When you package items, you put them in a box, a bag, a plastic bag, something like that, right? Depending on the piece of evidence you're collecting.
Yes.
Did you have any way to keep that glass from never disintegrating anymore so that it wouldn't change from the way it looked on October 2nd if you impounded it?
No, with shattered glass, it would continue to shatter. We have no way to package it to stay in its form when it's already broken.
So when you're talking about impounding that item or just throwing it away, if you put it in a box and you travel it to impound and then somebody throws it up into wherever it goes, could you say if you pulled it back out 5 years later that it looked exactly like it did that day when it fell onto the ground?
Absolutely not.
So is that why photographs were taken there?
Photographs, yes.
So you can see where she's telling the story there. She's the one who's explaining what's happening, and she's explaining why the glass might not have been saved, why photographs would be done, rather than saying to the witness, now, you don't have the glass. Were there things you did to preserve it? Just something a little more relaxed, a little less direct. Overview. What do I think about how Lori Vallow Daybell is doing? Well, I want to make a couple of points. Number one, way better than she did in the Charles Vallow trial. Way, way better. These are decent cross-examinations. She's making some strong points. She's pointing out some holes in the law enforcement investigation into Brandon Boudreaux's shooting. It's not an easy case, really, for the prosecution because of the fact that there isn't a lot of direct evidence linking what happened to Lori Vallow Daybell. Now, many of us on the outside who have followed all of these trials believe that we see a pattern. We see the way that these all fit together and the way they work together, but the jury doesn't have all of that. The jury only has little bits and pieces of what we know in a broader sense from having watched all of the trials. So Lori is making some decent headway with that. Now, that said, I think Lori is now running into her arch nemesis, Ray Hermosillo, the detective from Rexburg, Idaho. And I think things will be very different as she gets into, as that witness comes to the stand. I missed the last hour, so I don't know exactly where we are, but I believe things will be really different. And so I don't know that it will maintain that way, but I do think she's making more points than she did last time. In a sense, it drives me crazy to say that, to even be thinking that. But in another sense, it also is reassuring because that's really the way the legal system ought to work. It really ought to be the case that the defendant comes and makes the very best points they can, that if there are flaws and problems with an investigation, it gets pointed out. That does need to happen. And if it's not done solely because either the lawyer or the defendant representing themselves is so weak and they don't understand how to do that, that's really not justice and that's not right. So this time around, I think she's doing much better and it's going to be different in that regard. I can't, Janet, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And Baba D, we're going to do questions now. So if you have questions, if you could put your question marks at the beginning of the question, it will help me spot it in the chat. Baba D asking me, do you think the judge is waiting to enforce 404 so Ray Hermosillo can disclose the previous convictions and bury Lori Vallow Daybell once again? That's an interesting question, Baba D. I don't think that the judge will be making any decisions based on that. I think he would like to keep out that evidence of the other convictions. And honestly, a lot of it is not just a matter of that's the best thing to do in terms of the law, because I think Lori is opening the door more and more. I really do believe part of that is the self-preservation of realizing they have to be super careful. They must be really careful if they want to keep whatever verdict they get on appeal. If Lori is convicted, but she's convicted and all of those other murders come in and there's an argument that maybe they shouldn't have and she was representing herself, it's going to be far more likely to be reversed. So I think he's just making a wise choice there. And I think he's avoiding that. But I have missed the last hour, so who knows what happened. I'm very curious to get back to it and find out. All right, so let's head over and look at some questions. And let's see how far back I need to go. Hopefully Annie is as far back. There it is. Doesn't it seem the prosecutor made progress today with storage and internet searches? So I only saw part of that because a lot of that was happening right at the end when I was finishing up getting ready for this. So I missed a little bit of it. Annie feels like Lori made points, but loves to argue. It's not sympathetic to a jury. Okay. So if I had to predict, first of all, if you've been following the channel, I know Annie knows, I always predict that the defendant is going to be convicted. I don't do that because I'm a genius or because I just have a bent to believe that I do that because I have a 99% chance of being correct. So hey, those are pretty good odds. If you're going to Vegas and you get 99%, you're taking it. Am I right? So I do feel like in the end that the prosecutor will probably prevail, that the ultimate result, if you're going to be a betting person, you're going to go with guilty. But I do think I have pledged to always try to be as honest with you as I can about what's happening. And that's really easy. Sometimes that's easy because I think everybody pretty much agrees with that. And that's what I'm seeing. But sometimes it's hard. And today is one of the days that it's hard because although I do think Lori did well, I know an awful lot about the pattern because this is the 4th case we've covered. And so it really is hard to say that. But I do want to be honest with you that I think the presumption, which held true in Charles Vallow's case, that she just really didn't really show up in her defense very much, is not the case in this trial. Brad asking about having Karen Reed withdrawal. When do we get more? I will probably do one more on Karen Reed. Thank you for letting me know, Brad, that that's a real interest to you. Sort of just looking at the numbers, it seems like the general vote from the channel has been that people would rather hear about this case than about Karen Reed. But I really appreciate your vote, Brad, and I'll give that some thought. Texas 2 pugs. Will the green chili chicken enchiladas make it back into court? I don't think so. For one thing, they haven't brought in Lori's brother this time, right? Adam hasn't been asked to testify so far. Maybe he will, but I don't think so. He was really involved in coming. It was the day of he was supposed to meet with Charles. They were going to be seen about pulling Lori's temple recommend. That's not really relevant this time around in terms of Brandon Boudreaux's shooting. So I don't think he'll be in. So unfortunately, no green chili chicken enchiladas reprise for us. All right. Do you know if Brandon is colorblind? I don't know, AC. That's an interesting question, but I would think he would have said that if that were the case. I would think he would have said, well, I said gray, but I'm colorblind, so everything's a shade of gray to me. And he didn't say that, so I'm guessing not. Reality check. Why is she still called Lori Vallow Daybell? Shouldn't it just be Lori Daybell? I think just everyone got used to calling her Lori Vallow for a long time, and then she was Lori Vallow Daybell. So I think she has all 3 names. I don't know why. I just tend to call her all 3. It's just maybe habit. All right. Smooth Man Chew, did Lori get thrown out today? Not that I am aware of, but who knows what happened in that final hour. Maybe I'll find out something exciting. Brad Tipton, how far can the prosecution go unobjected without it being an appeal issue? You know, Brad, that's a good question. And I don't know that there's an answer to that. Typically, the appellate court is only going to look at what was raised in the trial court. So if something happens and you don't bother to say anything about it, then you can't argue it on appeal because you didn't deal with it and say something about it at the time. So WebFan is thinking that Melanie was to be the next victim, and this explains why she's not being charged. I don't know, but we are doing a video on that. I was truly surprised when the prosecutor made the statement that Melanie was still under investigation, and I want to know more about that. So what I've been doing is getting some help from numerous people, going back through the videos and trying to figure out where exactly are things with Melanie. Does she have any involvement? What would the prosecutor even charge her with? And why hasn't the prosecutor charged her yet? So if you are not yet subscribed to the channel, please be sure to hit that subscribe button. That video will be coming up. I don't know if it'll be tomorrow night or the next night, but it's coming up really soon. Thank you again for 200,000 subscribers. I honestly cannot even begin to say thank you enough. I am so excited about that. Thank you to Marlon and to Mama Pinks. Marlon has done a special video for us that will celebrate our moving to 200,000 subscribers. So here you go. Thank you, Marlon.